أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما على ابنتك وحبيبتك صاحبة الضلع المكسور والخد المسطور والجنين المسقطي بين الباب والجدار، فاطمة الزهراء روح لها الفداء. لعن الله الظالمين لكم سادتي من الأولين والآخرين. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا غريب يا مظلوم يا عطشان كربلاء. سيدي يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة، يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. الواثبين لظلم آل محمد ومحمد ملقا بلا تكفين، والقائلين لفاطم آذيتنا في طول نوح دائم وحنيني، والداخلين على البتولة بيتها والمسقطين لها أعز جنيني، ومجمعي حطب على البيت الذي لم تجتمع لولاه، لم يجتمع لولاه شمل الدين، والقائدين إمامهم بنجاده، وعليا والقائدين إمامهم بنجاده، والطهر تعدو خلفه برني. Those who claim to be Muslims and followers of Rasulullah, when Prophet Muhammad died, was martyred with the poison, and before he was even buried, they attacked the house of Fatima al-Zahra. They broke her rib, they killed her fetus, they took Amir al-Mu'mineen by force to the masjid, while Fatima's following them. خلوا ابن عمي أو لا أكشف للدعاء يا راسي، وأشكو للإله شجوني ولاذت ورا الباب اختفت فاطم ولا ذات عصرها الماء له مروة، ولا ذات يا خايب لا مجابلتك، ولا ذات ذنب لجلة توسدها المنية، يا ذنب لجلة توسدها يا المنية. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. الواثبين لظلم آل محمد. As we mentioned in the beginning of the poem, about a group of people who jumped and hastened to oppress the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and they are of the ones who claim to be the followers of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And we said as well, after we finished the na'i وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. Oppressors and oppression, it's something that we live constantly with. We cannot claim that there is 1 hour or 1 minute that we live in this world that there is no oppression. It didn't start when the war nowadays happened, or it doesn't start where something major happened, when someone kills someone or when the blood is spilled. It's something that is greater than that. Sometimes it's hidden, we do not see it. So that's why we are supposed to try to learn how to detect oppression and how do we detect the oppressors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the standards in the Quran. He says, وَمَنْ يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Allah in this verse defines oppression, and He defines the oppressors, and He helps me in order to distinguish who is the oppressor that I'm living with. Is it only an enemy that doesn't say the shahadat, that only seeking dunya and they don't care about killing the children and the women? Or it's something that can be hidden within, something that I live with. It is important when I try to fix up an oppression, or when I'm trying to stand up against the oppressors, I have to make sure that I'm not an oppressor myself. I have to make sure that when I am defending the oppressed, I am not oppressing. So we do not mix between good deed and a bad deed, because when doing that, it destroys our good deeds. I think that I'm doing the right thing, and I think that I am successful on the day of judgment, but I won't. Why didn't we deal properly with the real oppression that was going around years before even these whole nations that are nowadays on earth that are created? A land was stolen. Well, we have a land that was stolen way back, the land of Fatima al-Zahra, Fadak. And a door was burnt, or houses fell apart. The house of Fatima al-Zahra and her door were burnt. The narration mentions that they didn't only put the firewood on the door, they actually put it on the rooftop, and they surrounded the house with fire in order to suffocate whoever is inside the house. And here we're not talking about an oppressor who doesn't believe in Islam. We are speaking, this kind of oppression is so much harder. That's why I'm trying to compare, because I've seen since the beginning of the war, in order to make people sympathize with the tragedy of Fatima al-Zahra, we had to compare it with some of the videos that we are seeing nowadays. If we look at Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein at that age, weeping over the mother, like in order to understand that, look at the videos, how the children are crying over their mothers in what is happening around the world nowadays. Do we need to see the tragedy in front of our eyes in order to understand the tragedy of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim. In fact, our identity and the relationship with Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim is what gives us the strength in order to stand up against the oppressor, in order to refuse oppression. So, as I mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse, He says, and whoever transgresses the limits of Allah, it is those who are the oppressors. Whoever transgresses the limits of Allah, hududullah, all the ahkam that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to follow, all the haram and the halal, once we stick to it, then we are not oppressors. That's why oppression is two kinds. There's an oppression that I apply on myself, a person who oppresses himself. And we mentioned earlier, this kind of oppression is hidden. So this kind of oppression, we do not see it. How do I oppress myself? Does it always have to be through committing sins and throwing myself into the hellfire? No. Sometimes if I'm sitting, I'm performing my daily prayers, I'm doing my duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I am not progressing. When someone prays every day until the prayers becomes malaka, it's something normal, there is no effort there. I do it with my eyes closed, as they say. But I do it just because I'm used to it. There is no progression there. Then I performed oppression on myself. So the definition of oppression هو التعدي والخروج عن حدود الله, to transgress the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by leaving a wajib or committing a haram. When I commit a haram or leave a wajib, this is considered oppression. Either I see it from myself, which is harder to detect, or I see it around the world. And we see that the people stood up for the oppression that is happening now just when it became bloody. And it's been bloody for a long time. But we've seen oppression that is happening upon the Shia. What makes this oppression greater? Is it because in the media it's what's it called? مروج لها أكثر يعني. It's been more famous, more viral just because for certain politics, then they support it, then we have to support it. And the Shia of Afghanistan that are being killed and bombed and slaughtered, no one knows about them. Just a few days ago, the Shia in Pakistan were bombed and killed, and no one speaks about them. So, in the narration, ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ مَنْ عَصَى اللَّهَ وَأَطَاعَ الشَّيْطَانِ. So the first kind of oppression, مَنْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ, a person who oppresses himself, who disobeys Allah and who obeys the shaitan. Obeys the shaitan by postponing his prayers. Obeying the shaitan by committing the haram. By saying, like, not caring about the bad words that he says. Not watching his behavior. A person who prays and he doesn't even concentrate in his prayers. These things we do constantly. We fall short constantly on daily basis. We oppress ourselves. And then we claim to stand up for oppression and stand against oppressors just because they are shedding blood. And that kind of harm that has been happening, it's only a harm that causes the person in the dunya. And the greater harm is in the day of judgment, where the eternal hellfire for a person who oppresses himself. And in another narration, من أهمل العمل بطاعة الله ظلم نفسه. And whoever disobeys or like disregards the acting upon the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oppressed himself. And this is the first kind. The second kind is when I oppress others. A person goes and protests, and in his house he oppresses his father, disrespects his parents. And he oppresses his brothers by taking the rights. He oppresses the people, not only by harming them, by standing and watching. When I see oppression around the world and I say nothing, I am oppressing them. I have a certain circle of effect that I can cause. Then I have to take that chance. In the narration, بِئْسَ الزَّادِ إِلَى الْمَعَادِ الْعُدْوَانُ عَلَى الْعِبَادِ. That the worst kind of luggage that you take for the hereafter is to be harmful to the people. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Wallahi la'in abitu ala hasak al-sa'dan. Wallah, by the name of Allah, if I sleep on hasak al-sa'dan, is kind of thorns that are very hard. They stick to the ground and very hard to remove. If I sleep on hasak al-sa'dan, on this kind of thorns, وَأُجَرُّ فِي الْأَغْلَالِ مُصَفَّدًا, if I was dragged by shackles, أحب إلي من أن ألقى الله ورسوله يوم القيامة ظالما لبعض العباد. It's more loved to me than meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment and I oppress some of His worshippers. And I said sometimes oppression is by harming the people directly. Some kind of oppression is standing and watching. There is no greater oppression that happened since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation worse than usurping the khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then what happened to Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam? Because that, when it happened, it led a lot of people to the hellfire. Not only people were killed in the dunya. We saw that the companions of Ahlul Bayt didn't care about dying in this dunya because they died on the right path. Ali al-Akbar says to Al-Imam al-Hussein, oh father, aren't we on the right path? أَوَلَسْنَا عَلَى الْحَقِّ. Then why should we care whether we fall upon death or death falls upon us? This kind of harm in the dunya, it doesn't matter. Of course, it matters, but only in a worldly matter. Only something that is physical and it's temporary. While the permanent kind of harm is what is happening on the day of judgment. When I see the oppression around me, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving me the standards? Why do we have a narration that tells you that there are kinds of oppression that is when you oppress yourself? And there's the second kind is when you oppress people directly. And there's a third kind is when you watch and you do not defend and you do not stand up against the oppressors. Why all these standards and all these ways to help you to detect this kind of oppression? Why? Because when I want to defend the oppressed, I have to be a just person myself. I'm not supposed to be oppressing as well. Not myself and not others. Because if I do that, then I won't be standing up against the oppressors properly. Because my standards now are not accurate. I'm unable to detect oppression. And I'm unable to detect the oppressor until it becomes this viral and it becomes, everyone speaks about and becomes with blood shedding. وغاصبا لشيء من الحطام وكيف أظلم أحدا لنفس يسرع إلى البلا قفولها. Amir al-Mu'mineen says that to sleep on that kind of thorns and to be dragged by shackles is more love to me than meeting Allah and I oppress someone. And how would I commit such oppression? And I want you to take this example and apply it on all of the kinds of the oppression that I mentioned. And how would I commit a kind of oppression for the sake of a nafs that lives a very short time? تسرع إلى البلا قفولها ويطول في الثرى حلولها. And it stays for so long on the ground, in the grave. If I keep this rule in my mind when I seek my desires, not caring about halal and haram, I think to myself, who am I seeking these desires for? Who am I disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for? For this nafs that is going to stay temporarily in this dunya and is not going to live for long and it's going to stay for long in that grave. For whose sake? So it's not worth it. قال الله تعالى وعزتي وجلالي لا يجوزني ظلم ظالم ولو كف بكف. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by my might, that the oppression of the oppressors would not be left unpunished. Even if it's a slap with a slap. أو مسحة بكف. Or if someone wipes you on the cheek just in the intention to oppress you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala won't let that pass. Especially the ضعيفين, as the narration mentions. اتقوا الله في الضعيفين المرأة والولد. Be pious when it comes to the two weak individuals, the woman and the child. When I say weak, when a woman gets married to a man and she lives with him, this stranger, she lives with him under a same roof. Of course, I don't know if it applies on us here in Australia, but, and the child, how do I oppress them? Sometimes I oppress my child and I oppress the people around me, the children around me in my community, by not teaching them, by not educating them with my behavior first and my words second. Because nowadays, the war that we see around the world, in Palestine and with Israel, it's a war to defend an identity. It's a war of identity. Their presence, the land is part of your identity. You as a Muslim is part of your identity. It's a war of identities, and our identity is threatened nowadays. So I have to protect this identity. If I do not play an important role in my house to help my spouse to be a better worshipper to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by wearing a proper hijab, by praying on time, by praying in a good pace, concentrating, not playing with my buttons and with my zippers while I'm praying, which we see a lot, or looking around while I'm praying, because this is your identity. This is how we oppress ourselves. This is a kind of oppression that is unseen and it's hidden and it's hard to detect. So, if I do not play an important role in educating the children and the community and this generation that is coming up, this identity is fading. We see now the identity, which is the land and the souls and the spirit, has been taken in Palestine. But we have an identity that is threatened more than that. And it's more important than that kind of identity. Because then these people that are dying and they know that they are honest. And they have a haqq, they have a right to ask for this land. But if to die and your identity that you were supposed to stand up for and support is fading, then there is no point out of all of this standing up against the oppressors, and I am being oppressed myself. Even to oppress an ant, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't tolerate. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, وَاللَّهِ لَوْ أُعْطِيتُ الْأَقَالِيمَ السَّبْعِ بما تحت أفلاكها على أن أعصي الله في نملة أسلبها جلب شعير ما فعلت. If I was given the 7 continents with everything that it contains, for me to oppress an ant by taking a particle of weight from this ant, I won't do it. How would I look at oppressing myself? And I'm definitely greater than an ant in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or oppressing my own family members or the people around me by not, as I mentioned, not playing a role in delivering the important, or being a reminder at least. A reminder of what will help me succeed in the day of judgment, which is the reminder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The role that I should take, I'm not supposed, as the hadith says, it's haram for me to be an aid to the zalim, to be a help to the oppressor. In the case of the first kind of oppression, which is myself, sometimes I am a support to myself against myself. Like what? Maybe I don't want. I'm strong enough to fight the sin, but I can help this nafs that is ammara bisu, that is an oppressor. I can help this nafs to defeat me by putting myself in a position or in a place that reminds me of a sin, like gathering with the wrong friends, or going to places where there is music that is being played, or sitting in gatherings that doesn't remind me of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it makes this time that I'm spending a waste of time. When I'm doing these and I'm not preparing the introductions that helps me progress in my path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I am aiding the zalim, which is the nafs. And then aiding the zalim who oppresses the people is haram. As in the istifta'at of Sayyid Sistani, You know, every company that supports Israel, every company that supports a tyrant, financially, it's haram for me to buy from them. It's haram. If I get to know for sure, and I'm certain, that this company supports Israel financially or any tyrant financially, it's haram. To what point? There is a famous story of Safwan bin Mahran. Safwan bin Mahran, he used to rent out camels, like how nowadays we go and rent out a car. He used to rent camels to people. So once Harun al-Rashid, la'natullah alayh, every year he used to rent the camels from Safwan ibn Mahran, and he goes to Mecca. And once Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam met Safwan ibn Mahran, he said to him, إقرأك, he said to him, يا صفوان كل شيء منك حسن جميل إلا شيء واحد. Safwan, he was a mu'min. He was a close companion to Imam al-Kadhim. He said, everything that you do is beautiful. All of your actions, your behavior, your characteristics are good except for one thing. He said, what? He said, renting out these camels to this man. He said to him, oh master, لم أكره مثلا أشرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا. I didn't do it just for the sake of sharing in his tyranny. I only hire my camels for him only when he wants to go to Mecca for Hajj. And I don't go myself to serve him. I send my servants, the people who work with me. Then the Imam told him, don't you like that this man, this tyrant, throughout the trip to stay alive until he comes back and pays you your money? He said, of course. He said, أَيَقَعُ كِرَاؤُكَ عَلَيْهِمْ? He said, you will get paid after that from them. He said, نَعَمْ جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ. And I like for them to stay alive until they come back. He says, مَنْ أَحَبَّ بَقَاءَهُمْ فَهُوَ مِنْهُمْ. Whoever likes for them to stay, for the tyrants to stay and to live longer, then he's from them. To a point that that tyrant was going to Hajj and he was performing a ibadah, but just because he's a tyrant, the Imam tells him, you hiring the camels for him and hoping that he stays alive so you can get paid, this kind of support is haram, is not allowed. Then Safwan ibn Mahran, when he came back, when Harun Rashid came back, he sold all of his camels and he left this business. Then Harun Rashid sent for him. He said to him, why did you sell your camels? He said, Ana Shaykhun, I became old and my workers are not doing a good job, so I wanted to get rid of this business. He says, Wallah, this is the direction of the Imam Mohsen ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim salawatullahi wa salam. This is his teachings. He's certain, and the people are, this is why they do not want the teachings of Ahlul Bayt to spread. This is why they wanted to hide the tragedy of Fatima al-Zahra. Even up till now, we see the Shia, some of the Shia, they do not want to mention Fatima al-Zahra or the killers of Fatima al-Zahra, Umar and Abu Bakr, who killed Fatima al-Zahra. They do not want to mention them. For the sake of what? And then you don't care about unity in the Western country, and you don't care about your charity being revoked for the sake of Palestine, but you just care about what? You care about what other people are going to say if I speak up about the tragedy of Fatima al-Zahra. Being silent about this tragedy is haram, is aiding the zalimeen, aiding those who usurp the khilafah of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah wa sallam. And this kind of tragedy is greater. This kind of oppression is greater. If I do not support this and support that, then my standards are not accurate. Then I have to fix my standards. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. As I mentioned, that the war that is happening is a war against an identity. And our identity is in danger day after day. We have to understand and distinguish when I want to stand up with the oppressed against the oppressor, I should not be deceived and stand with the oppressed all the way until the end, because the oppressed might be an oppressor one day. That's why when I say we have to fix our standards, we have to know. Sometimes Amir al-Mu'minin says, كُونَا لِلظَّالِمِ خَصْمًا وَلِلْمَظْلُومِ عَوْنًا. He says to Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein, you have to be the enemy of the oppressor and the supporter of the oppressed. As long as the oppressor is an oppressor and the oppressed is an oppressed. So even if a Christian comes to me and he has a right, I'm supposed to defend him because I stand up with what's right according to the teachings of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salam alayhi. This is what they told. This identity, that's why we see only the Shia nowadays are supporting the oppressed around the world. Only the Shia. The Shia are the most who are supporting the oppressed. Why? Because this is the teachings of Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salam. But I have to understand, when I support a Christian because he has a right, I support him only in that event. But if that oppressed in a different aspect, he's an oppressor, I should understand that I should not stand with him. The point that I'm trying to make here, we as Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we support everyone who is considered oppressed. But we do not tolerate oppression, especially against Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salam. Especially those who have and hold hatred against the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salam. And everyone knows and believes that all of the oppressed that are originally Nawasib and haters of the Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen, even if we stand up with them on this day, when they get the chance, they will stab the Shia in the back. And this happened a lot in history. How many people pledged allegiance to Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi? 44. And how many of them they showed up upon his doorstep the next day? 4 people. How many people claimed to be Muslims in Medina during the attack on the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Fatima al-Zahra? 10,000 in Medina. How many people showed up to fight and hold their swords in front of the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen when there was protests in the house? Only 4 stayed. Ammar, al-Miqdad, Salman and Abu Dhar. While the rest, they all claimed to be Muslimin and they said the shahadat, but they are the reason why a lot of people are going to fail on the day of judgment, just because they do not have the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam li dhikrihi as-salawat. So our identity is for us to be linked to Ahlul Bayt. Irtibatuna, I will mention a few points before I end my lecture. Irtibatu Shia bil-Aim. This is my identity. And everyone who has this kind of link, I support him to the end of the line. As long as they don't have this kind of relationship with Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salam alayhim, I support them only when they are oppressed and only when they are in the position of being weak. So كيفية ارتباط الشيعة بالأئمة, and I'm mentioning this for us to understand the importance of this identity, so we stand up against the oppressor, which is the one who's attacking this identity. A man came to the masjid of Rasulullah and he started to look at the face of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I love you. He says, do you love me? He said, yes. He said, then get prepared to poverty. Then he said, I love Ali. He said, do you love Ali? He said, then get ready for the hatred of the people. As long as you have this khasla, then you have to get ready to the hatred of the people, just having the wilayah. So it is important for us to understand the importance of this relationship with Ahlul Bayt, being a Shia, so we can do whatever it takes in order to stop the oppression against this identity, so I can help myself, not to oppress myself, to strengthen this relationship with Ahlul Bayt, so I can help the generation and the people around me, the children, my family, my friends, to be a good reminder to strengthen this identity. I'm supposed to understand the importance of it. First, الشيعة من فاضل طينة الأئمة, that the Shia are the excess of the mud of the Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim. If you are part of that mud, then you are a person of value. Don't sell yourself cheap. عجنوا بماء الولاية. When we say عجنوا, when someone is making a dough, that mud was ma'juna with the water of the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim gave us light in our hearts. إِنَّ الْأَئِمَّةَ هُمُ الَّذِينَ يُنَوِّرُونَ قُلُوبَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And this light I need it especially when I'm attacked by the shaitan, when I am lured towards the sin. I need this light. Because this light, if it's not there, I will be like the Israelis now. How many people they are, how many protests around the world? Do you think they care? When it comes to the nafs, من لم يكن له واعظ من نفسه لا تنفعه المواعظ. Whoever doesn't have an advisor from within, from himself, all of the sermons and the lectures and the advices, it doesn't benefit him. I'll become like them if that light is not there. Ahlul Bayt, they gave us knowledge. Do you know why Amirul Mu'mineen is called Amirul Mu'mineen? In the narration, لأنه يمير شيعته العلم. يمير شيعته العلم. He gives you the rizq of ilm. And then Al-Imam Al-Hussein صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Al-Imam Al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salam alayhim, just to finish with this, Al-Imam Al-Hussein, when he came and he gathered with Bani Muqatil, Bi'amr ibn Qais al-Mashriqi and his cousin, he said to them, did you come to support me? Because Imam Al-Hussein, obviously, he was oppressed. He was madloom. He said to them, did you come to support me? They said, no. We have a lot of children. We have a lot of worldly matters. This is all the excuses that we use to postpone our prayers and to stand or sit down in our homes, not to go outside and support the oppressed. They said to him, we have a lot of children and we have merchandise for people and it's a trust. And we are afraid if we come with you that this trust would be lost and our children would be orphans. And then he said to them, انطلقا فلا تسمعا لي واعية ولا تريا لي سوادا. He said, go, try your best not to hear my tragedy and not to see my physical shape or our people. فإنه من سمع واعيتنا أو رأى سوادنا فلم يجبنا أو يغثنا كان حقا على الله عز وجل أن يكبه على منخريه في نار جهنم. Whoever hears about our tragedy, us, he said us, all of us, from Rasulullah until Sahib al-Asr wa zaman. How many Shia around the world are oppressing the Imam, are postponing his reappearance through their actions. He says whoever hears our tragedy and he doesn't support us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will throw him upon his nose on the day of judgment. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam was oppressed. At the age of 18, they attacked her house, they burnt her door, they killed her fetus. When they gathered the fire in front of the house of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she called, Ya Abatah, Ya Rasulullah. When they heard her voice, they said to Umar, Inna fi dari Fatima. Fatima is in the house. He said, so what? A man who claimed to be the Khalifa of Rasulullah, a companion of Rasulullah, attacks the daughter of Rasulullah. Who do we stand with? Who do we stand against? Who do we support? A lady at the age of 18 behind the door calling Ya Abatah, Ya Rasulullah, and a man who claims to be a Muslim pushes the door against her until a nail goes into her chest and her fetus would fall down on the ground, and she can't call Amirul Mu'mineen because she knows Amirul Mu'mineen had a wasiyah from Rasulullah. Rasulullah told him, if they attack, you cannot hold your sword against them because they will accuse you that you are a person who's trying to take the Khilafah by force and by sword, and then the religion would be wiped. And then she called Ya Fadda, Ya Faddatu asnidini, faqad wa rabbi asqatu janini. فقد وربي أسقطوا ما في أحشائي من حام. The Then they took Amir al-Mu'mineen to the masjid. Fatima alayha salam, she stood up, she followed Amir al-Mu'mineen and she said, leave my husband, otherwise I will lift my hands to the sky and I will supplicate so Allah can punish you in this moment. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he sent his slave Qunfudh. He said to him, Ya Qunfudh, arji'ha, force her back to her house. Qunfudh alayhi la'ainullah came back to Fatima. When she didn't go back to the house, he slapped her across the face until she fell on the ground. أبويا أبويا أمر على عبده ضربني أو من ضربته للقاع ذبني أو لانكسار قلبه أو لا رحمني. The narration says that Fatima to Zahra, after that day, she kept hiding her face from Amir al-Mu'mineen. And once Amir al-Mu'mineen, he looked at the face of Fatima to Zahra and he saw her eye red. He told her, Ya Fatima, min ayna hadha? When did this happen? She said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, it is from that day that they took you by force to the masjid. The la'in came back and slapped me across the eye. يا الباب يا الباب أنا لبست الحزن طول العمر. يا الباب ذهيل وما بقى لي فكر. يا الباب نشدك وين محسن سقاط. يا الباب يوم العصرة والزهرة الزكية. يا يوم العصرة والزهرة يا الزكية.
يا زهرة يا زهرة يا زهرة يا زهرة يا زهرة. Please come closer. تفضلوا لقدام. يا زهرة يا فزعك قوم لبنيتك تراها يا طه مجبل الجبلة تراها. الحزين عالكون بجفوفه تراها. وينوحي حسين اللي مصاب والزكية. يا زهرة يا زهرة يا زهرة. ما شاء الله بعد يا زهرة يا زهرة حزينة وباتت الليلة بألمها. يتيمة وتكسر الخاطر بلمها. وصبورة استعرثت زينب بلمها. ويتانيها القهر بالغاضرية. يا زهرة
صار في أسانيد الروايات تجد تاريخ طعنات وآهات تأمل منصفا شرع السماوات ترى الزهراء جرحا كل أوقات يا زهراء يا زهراء هي وراء الباب لاذت سورة القدر ونادتهم جهلتم حسرة قدري باسم الدين جاءت عصبة الغدر وشبوا نارهم في آية الدهر يا زهرة أعلى صوتك يا زهرة أي تعالت للسماء هاتها الكبرى عجيب هل دم الزهراء إذا يجرى أصول الدين تنعى لم تطق صبرا وباسم الله لله شكت أمرا يا زهرة يا زهرة غدا التوحيد والتأويل مكسورة فم التفسير أضحى اليوم منحورة. الشاعر علي حبيب الشابي أحقا ظلمة تستأكل النور وتحيي القتل والحرمان والجور يا زهرة ما شاء الله يا زهرة ألا يا حيدر الكرار يا صبره وترى ما حاله إذ شاهد العصر إلى الزهراء يبدي نظرة نظرة ودرى ماتت بتلك الصفعة العشرة يا زهرة يا زهرة أشد الحزن كسرا زينب الطهري أشد الحزن كسرا زينب الطهري ترى أما لها قيدت إلى القبر حرام وردة في مطلع العمر حرام وردة في مطلع العمر ترى بستانها ليلا بلا فجر مظلومة يا زهرة مظلومة مظلومة هلا مظلومة أشد الحزن كسرا زينب الطهر ترى أما لها قيدت إلى القبر حرام وردة في مطلع العمر ترى بستانها ليلا بلا فجر مظلومة يا زهراء يا زهراء مظلومة مصاب في الدنا بانت علاماته مصاب في الدنا بانت علاماته وهدت عرش رب الكون دمعاته حسين ذا علت يا دهر صرخاته بكت عينيه آهاته مظلومة يا زهراء مظلومة يا زهراء محرومة مصاب في الدنا بانت علاماته وهدت عرش رب الكون دمعاته حسين ذا علت يا دهر صرخاته بكت عينيه آهاته مظلومة يا زهراء مظلومة يا زهراء. موفقين إن شاء الله. أجركم على السيدة فاطمة الزهراء، أرجو المعذرة من الجسارة. موفقين إن شاء الله. اللهم نسألك وندعوك بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها يا الله عجل لوليك الفرج واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والمستشهدين بين يديه يا الله. اللهم تقبل منا هذا القليل واجعله في ميزان حسناتنا. اللهم لا تخرجنا من هذه الدنيا حتى ترضى عنا. أمتنا على ولاية أمير المؤمنين يا الله. اللهم شافي وعافي جميع المرضى لا سيما مرضى المنظورين ومن أوصانا بالدعاء يا الله. اللهم اقضي حوائجنا وحوائج المحتاجين من هذا الجمع يا الله. المؤسسين لهذا المأتم الشريف تقبل اللهم أعمالهم ولأمواتهم وأمواتكم وأموات السامعين والجالسين والروح الطاهر للسيدة فاطمة الزهراء. نهدي ثواب مجلسنا هذا ثواب سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقها صلوات فاطمية بأعلى